Welcome to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. Now, here's the host of the show, a man who once lost a movie because he got a bad recommendation from the real life star of The Sound of Music, Maria Von Trapp. It's TV's Tim Stack. Yay! Yay! Yeah! Listen to that crowd. Oh, the crowd loves me. You're listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. I think my guest today is the guy who made up the term TV's Tim Stack. We'll get to him. In the meantime, my Maria Von Trapp story is a little nutty. So back in the 80s, I actually got lucky and I got a couple of TV movies made back when they were making TV movies. And so I did one with Robert Conrad and one with Valerie Bertinelli. Again, I had no business doing these, but they bought them. So it was like, okay. So I came up with this idea. My mom lived in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up. And there's this incredible furniture maker, really beautiful furniture. His name was George Nakashima. You can Google him. Beautiful. I mean, just incredible work, not cheap. So, but I heard his story and it was really interesting. He had been interned during World War II and not great things happened. But he sort of introduced the world of spirit and of the forest and trees. And at the time, I was friendly with Pat Morita, Karate Kid guy, who came on to do Son of the Beach later on. He was really funny, great guy. And I thought, wow, his story is really cool. There's a story here. So I approach Nakashima had since passed away. I approached his widow to get the rights to the story. And she said to me, that sounds really interesting. I'm going to talk to my friend and I'll get back to you. I went, okay, great. So a week goes by and then the phone rings and it's George Nakashima's wife. I can't remember her first name. And she said, well, I do not want to be a part of your movie and we do not want to be a part of this. And and she was very kind of obstinate. And I thought, well, that's weird. It was just all you have to do is say no thanks. And I said, oh, okay, is there any reason why? She said, well, I talked to my good friend who had a movie made about her. And she said it was a horrible movie and a horrible experience. And I said, oh, okay, well, no worries. Just, good luck. Do you mind me asking who your friend is? And she said, it's Maria Von Trapp. And I thought to myself, wait a second. Maria Von Trapp didn't like The Sound of Music? Like, who doesn't like The Sound of Music? It's one of the most beloved films of all time made. And I thought, well, if you're friends with Maria Von Trapp, I don't think you should be in the movie business either. So I called it a day. Anyway, that was my Maria Von Trapp story. So let's introduce my guest. And we're going to start with this little bit of clip, this little music from David Letterman. Okay, that clip was played for a reason. We're going to find out why. In the meantime, here comes the introduction. Dr. D, can I get a drum roll for this man? Okay, he is the writer of the movies Wild Hogs, Jerry and Marge Go Large, and Yogi Bear, to mention a few. There are many more. And his TV credits include Arrested Development, My Name Is Earl, we'll talk about that, and Life in Pieces, again, to mention a few. Please welcome the very prolific and successful Brad Copeland. Yay!
Woo! Happy to be here.
Thank you.
I have a Nakashima bench in the other room, a walnut bench, and I'll never look at it the same. I've never heard that story before.
Do you really have one?
I do. We have a lot of the old mid-century stuff that we've collected over the years. We got it, 20 years ago when it was still affordable. But that's amazing.
That's a crazy story. I didn't know that you have one.
Yeah, and I didn't know about his story either. I just figured, he's like I knew that the Charles Eames story of bending the plywood, in World War II, whatever. I didn't know that Nakashima had a big story.
No, well, he was friends with my mother. Somehow my mother had a radio show, so we used to have him on every couple of years or so. And he was a very interesting guy. And then there's a book about him, and he talks about. I'll see if I can find the book for you.
I want to get the rights now just to show you just as a complete dick move.
I think she has since passed away, and I know Maria von Trapp, God love her, has passed away. So that's crazy. It is beautiful furniture. It's unbelievable.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. And he definitely established that minimalistic, just pure walnut balance stuff. It was great.
Yeah, but he had this whole ritual with the tree when he was going to make furniture, and he, it was really cool. Anyway,
I do that. I have that same ritual when I write, because I know I'm going to print it on paper. So I go out
and honor a tree.
Exactly. I honor the tree. Say, you're going to be Yogi Bear.
That's funny. So, first of all, I got in touch with Brad to do this, and for some reason, I called in the letter. I was like, "Hey, would you mind doing this?" And I said, "And please, my best to your wife, Robin," and which he was nice enough. And I was so dead sure that it was Robin. It was like, it was no question.
Yeah.
And Brad reminded me his wife's name is Eric.
The amusing thing was the girl I had a crush on in elementary school was named Robin. And I was like, when you said, I'm like, oh, it's what could have been.
No, you did okay. So speaking of growing up, I just want to go back a little bit. You grew up in Florida, correct?
Yep, in Orlando, Florida.
Which is its own sort of like nurturing in a way. Florida's my friend, another writer from Florida, Barry Fernandez, says you go 10 miles from the ocean in Florida, you're in a different world. So clearly that had an effect on you.
It did. Florida's it's a weird life to start with, but then Orlando is even weirder because you have this cross section of tourists, but also just the reddest of the rednecks, and it's just all there. And it changes within a mile. If you get on the wrong side of the freeway, then you're at a place that you could get in some trouble if you don't have the right truck. So it's very strange. But I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and it's where you grew up, so it's all you know. And but clearly you had some adventure in you in order to get out. So which we'll get to. So, and the family, I remember there's some military in your family, right?
Yeah. So, well, my dad was in the Navy, but both my brothers, we were three pretty close in age. My older brother's 15 months older, and then another brother's 2.5 years older. So we were all, Irish twins, and 3 boys, and I was the youngest of 3 boys, and they're both military. One was an Apache pilot, and the other is a Navy Annapolis guy who flew the P-3 and then is currently the commander of a base in Virginia. So it's very strange. It's so weird. And so even growing up, they were the athletes, and they were, they're taller than me. On the short, I'm 6'2", and I'm the short one of the family. And I was like the marching band art kid. I just did art and band, and they just looked at me like I was from another planet, and they still do. They're still like, what the hell?
One time I remember you telling me you're going back to Newport, Rhode Island for a family reunion, and there's a big Navy presence there and all that. And I remember you even then saying, like, at this point, you're very successful and still like, hey, here comes the oddball. Here comes the weird guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It still is that. And there's still it's just a weird relationship, but I think, especially as a sitcom writer, it gave me a ton of stories, and it kind of molded me into this comedy writer. If you could forge a comedy writer, put him in marching band and give him 2, I imagine like the like Bill Paxton of Weird Science, that brother, give him 2 of those. And there's no other direction besides comedy writer.
So you mentioned Florida and Gators. So you go to the University of Florida, and one of the things I always loved about you talking about, we never got to see video, was you were literally the band major for the University of Florida band.
Yes.
Which is drum major. Which is, I'm guessing, at the University of Florida, a big deal.
It was.
Like, how did you get that? How did that come about?
I tried out for it. I was, I was in the band to start with. I was a trombone player, and it's a big band, but I think it was 400 people back then. And it's like politics. You start to kind of like make your moves within you. Like I became, I'm going to be section leader, and I'm going to make sure the band director knows me. I'm going to make sure he has knows interest. And then they have drum major tryouts. And some of it is technical. You have to know music, and you have to be able to arrange music and know how to arrange. But there's still 30 kids that know how to do that. So then you have an audition, and you have to kind of stand up and conduct and do all the things that you're supposed to do with no bands, just you're conducting a ghost and you come up with your own music. And I did something, I was definitely the underdog. The other guys had been doing it a few years. They had done it in high school. And so I conducted a marching band arrangement of Star Trek. And in the middle of the conducting thing, I had convinced my friend to put on a Star Trek uniform and to come and attack me during it. And then we had like a stage, like a stage Star Trek fight with the music. And the band directors were just like, what is happening? And it was like that first taste of like, you can break rules, you know, and I continued to do that throughout, you know, writing spec scripts or whatever. It's like you can you can really break rules in the creative world, and people often aren't expecting it. And it had great results. They're like, all right, well, this guy's going to be outside the box. Let's go with him. And it was an amazing experience. You know, you get to write the halftime shows. There's 85,000 people in that stadium. It's even more now. So it's like you have a captive audience for a Broadway show for 10 minutes every day, every week, every Saturday. And it was amazing. It was a lot of fun.
Was that your introduction to writing? I'm putting writing in quotes, but it sounds like you was.
Yeah, it was my introduction to writing somewhat. Like, you know, we did like a Blues Brothers show. So I got to write, you know, how me and the other drum major were going to act. And like, we can do scripted stuff within the halftime show. And we did a lot of creative outside the box stuff. The sad thing was this is before YouTube, just slightly. So now whenever these marching bands do it, especially like Ohio State and stuff, it's all viral on YouTube. Yeah. And we were doing all of it way before then. We were doing these crazy shows. We were doing, you know, a show where we broke down, everyone did the hustle, and we were doing all this stuff, and no one ever knew it. But yeah, that was my introduction to writing. And then weirdly, I got my senior year, I applied for to be intern at the Late Show with David Letterman in New York. That was even higher. That was even higher odds of not getting it. And marching band helped me get that.
How did marching band help you just in terms of writing?
Yeah, well, I applied for it, and I had done some humor columns and stuff in the school newspaper, and so that at least got me through the window of interviewing. They fly 200 kids out there, and then actually you fly yourself out there. They didn't pay for anything, but and then they interview those 200 kids for 10 departments. You know, there's a Paul Schaefer intern, there's the Letterman intern, and then there's 3 interns for the writing section. There's two interns for talent, blah blah blah. And I didn't think I was a shoe-in for anything. I didn't think I'd honestly get it, because you could tell they were like Harvard kids, and I'm just this dumb redneck from Florida. But the David Letterman's executive assistant, the top Lori Diamond, who's been with him, was with him since the NBC days. She was a marching band person. She was like,
really?
She's like, you're in the marching band. I love it. You know, I was in the marching band, and then I got into ballet and blah blah. So I just hit it off so well with her that by the time Letterman came through, she was like, she's like, this is the guy. This is the guy. He's going to be your intern.
Really funny. And
of course, David was like, yeah, whatever. And he keeps walking. So I got that purely just been lucky. I'm like the Forrest Gump of sitcom writers.
But so through the marching band.
Yeah, from in many ways. So yeah, I got that, and senior year of college, I headed out there, and I started writing and doing whatever I could to kind of show them that maybe I had a future as a writer. And then
did they let you write stuff?
Well, they let me write. David said I could submit for the top 10 list, and I did. And you know, he would circle it, and then when one got circled by Dave, the writing staff, the producer came and talked to me, and he said, I know Dave said this to be nice. I know we circled yours, not knowing, because it's all anonymous. You know what I mean? They're just putting it all in his box.
Right.
Said, but you're not in the guild, and we're not going to use this. But it didn't really matter, because it taught me like, oh, it's, you know, especially being a kid in Florida, you think that's like a superpower, you know, writing movies or writing for TV shows. And you know, as a writer in SNL and all, it's not a superpower. It's just, you just got to try it. And all the people doing it are just like everybody else. They just have a little creative spark, but a lot of it's just trusting that you have the ability to do it. In that moment, I realized, oh, I can do this. And I headed out to LA on Letterman's advice. He said, if you want to be a writer, this is the wrong place.
Okay, let's hold that. We'll get that out after the break, but we got a little time left before the break. Can you tell the story about David's car? Because
there's like 3 of them. Which one?
Oh,
the one where I crashed it?
Yes. It's one of my favorite Hollywood stories.
Oh, there's so many. But I got that internship. One of the things you have to check off when you're interviewing all the departments is, can you drive a stick? And I said, yeah, I can drive a stick.
Hey, you're in Florida.
I couldn't drive a stick. I couldn't drive a stick at all. I had been in like my friend's Volkswagen like twice.
Yeah.
So I got in there, and he had driven his Dodge Stealth that day, and it was a stick, and I put it in reverse thinking it was first, and just slammed into a taxi. Just crashed it on my first day. So I crashed his car.
So this is your first day.
First day, bent it all up, and then I did it like twice more. He drove his Porsche one. He had the 3 cars he would drive were the Porsche, the Dodge Stealth, and this crazy station wagon that was souped up that was built by Newman Haas Racing. And that one was so out of control. It had like a NASCAR engine. I would like drive it. I would drive it to my job was to drive it to the car wash, as part of this, go to the car wash, get it gassed up, and it's ready for him to drive back to Connecticut. And in the car wash, I drove it in, and it's just like, boop, 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 and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know. And they open the hood, and it's all just a NASCAR engine, like the chrome, the braided pipes and all this crazy stuff. And I wasn't allowed to say anything belonged to Letterman. So they looked at me and they're like, this is your car? And I'm like, yeah. It's a $100,000 engine.
And you cracked that one up too?
Yeah. That one I just stripped out the gears and did all kinds. He was always in his defense. He was very nice. He's like, whatever.
That's a wonder. That's such a great story. Okay, we got to take our first break. I'm talking to Brad Copeland. You are listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack.
All right.
That was great.
Right. Memory lane.
Yep. Does that say Star Power? Oh, you know who that is? Yeah, see, Camden has a celebrity living in its midst. It's the actor from Son of the Beach, TV's Tim Stack. Mr. Stack, good to see you again.
Good evening, my good man. You know who I am?
Of course I do, Mr. Stack.
I'm TV's Tim Stack from movies and basic cable television. 62 items on my IMDb page, 62. But they screwed me. They counted my Quincy two-parter as one thing. Hey, can I shoot something?
You know what, Mr. Stack, have you been drinking? Mr. Stack?
No. That was a clip from My Name Is Earl, which we're going to talk to. That joke in there, that was Brad's joke where I reached for the gun. Brad, I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that scene very well.
See if you can get, can I shoot your gun? And it's really funny. And they asked me if I'm drunk. So we'll put Earl on the back burner for a second because I want to go back. So then you go to Los Angeles, and I'm looking at the credits, and I had forgotten that your first credit was on the TV show NewsRadio.
NewsRadio, yeah.
And how did you get that gig?
So that was through Letterman. That was, he got me the interviews, but I wanted to move out. He said, you'll never be a writer at the Late Show because it's all National Lampoon. It's all Harvard guys. And I wasn't a Harvard guy. And he's like, they're never, especially back then when Harvard was kind of running everything and
right.
The Simpsons. He's like, you got to go somewhere in LA and start just, be a writer's assistant or a PA on a show.
And this is David Letterman telling you this.
Yep. This is Letterman telling me this.
Unbelievable. I mean, you wrecked 3 of his cars, unless he's trying to get you out of town to get you away from his car.
I'll tell you, the worst thing I did for him was not even wrecking his car. It was, I would, like I said, I gassed up his cars and took him to the parking garage. Well, one day I forgot to gas up the Dodge Stealth. I just forgot. And I went up to his office. I'm like, oh, crap, I forgot. So I ran down, got to the garage, took the Dodge Stealth. This is like at 2 p.m. or whatever. Drove it to get to gas, which is, 15 minutes of traffic. And I get a call. Back then he had the cell phone, it's like mounted to the console or whatever in 1997. And it's Lori Diamond's assistant. She's like, where are you? What happened? I'm like, oh, I forgot to get gas in the car. And she's like, Dave is standing in the parking garage, furious. And what had happened? And he's never done that in all that time. And that was the first day that the politically incorrect numbers had come in, and he saw he came in third after Leno and Bill Maher. So in a fury, he just left the office and he's like, screw it. I'm out. I'm not going to do a show today.
Just going to pick myself and go home.
Yeah, he was in a meltdown and he went to go home. I didn't know he knew where the garage was. I had no idea. So he walked down to the garage and he's like, where the hell's my key? And the valet, who's never met him before, is like, some kid took your car. So I'm out. It was crazy. But all that stuff happened, but he was nice. And yeah, the advice was go to LA and just try to make it. And he got me an interview on NewsRadio with Julie Bean, who had always also been his assistant, and she's actually a great writer out here now as well. And then I came out. I had never been to California. I didn't have family or friends here, and I just packed up my car. And I still had college left. I left college. I still to this day have not graduated because this was my
really.
Yeah, I'm like 10 credits short. Though I'm like an honorary alumni now, so I'm like, well, what do I need it for? But yeah, I came out here and met for that job, and then I realized I couldn't even get another interview. I didn't know anybody but that small, group of people that he had connected me to. So I realized after interviewing for NewsRadio that if I didn't get that call that I had gotten the job, I was just gonna have to drive back because I didn't have any money. And thank God they came through and I got a PA job on NewsRadio. And then within a year, I was a writer's assistant and moving my way up.
And wow, that is that's very lucky, but I understand why. So then you get a job as a writer's assistant on Grounded for Life, right?
No, that was for Grounded for Life. I got a staff job. That was my first writing job.
Oh, for some reason I equated you because I remember you sitting, first of all, when Brad types, maybe it's the musician in you, but for those of you on YouTube, your hands go like this. It's almost like a piano player. And I remember watching you one day and I thought like, wow, can he type? And you said you were a writer's assistant. I assumed it was for Grounded for Life. But also the other thing I really want to compliment you on is like, I'm not good at double tasking. You're unbelievable. Because you were typing, looking at the screen of what was being typed, but you were pitching something else.
Really?
And I remember maybe it's because I'm old and I was old and My Name Is Earl. Now I'm really old. But I remember thinking like, oh my God, that's like a Houdini trick. That's like a mental telepathy thing because you're typing like this, which I'm impressed with. What's on the screen is what somebody else pitched, but you're pitching another idea. Anyway.
The thing I learned I was a writer assistant on NewsRadio for a year and a half, and then I did a bunch of pilots, and then Grounded for Life read my spec script and gave me a staff job. But what made me great as a writer assistant was not speed, and I've told other writer assistants this, is I only took down the good jokes. like writers, you know how it is. They're all pitching.
Sure, they're pitching.
There's always some clams. I've pitched plenty of them. I wouldn't write those down. And then so when people would read the notes, they were just like, oh, here's all the funny stuff. And I just no one ever really pushed back. There were a few instances like on NewsRadio where someone would be like, hey, did you get that joke? And I'm like, oh, no, I missed it. But that's really what it was. You have to be a little bit of a curator on stuff. And you don't have to type as much.
But that takes guts because, rooms get political and people don't like their jokes not being up on the screen. And
I've never been short on arrogance. You know that.
I don't think it's arrogance. No, I don't think it is. I trust me, you wouldn't be here on this wildly popular podcast. Seriously, I just always thought it was a confidence. I didn't think of it as arrogance. I just thought it was confidence, but it was fun to watch.
I'll take confidence.
But always fun in the room. And so then you get after Grounded for Life, you get Arrested Development.
Wait, sorry, you cut out there for a second. Say that again.
Sorry, after Grounded for Life, you go to Arrested Development.
Yep, I did 3 years on Grounded for Life. Went to Arrested Development. Yeah.
And then how did you get that gig? You just you got some
that gig. I was actually Grounded for Life had a pickup for another 2 seasons, I think. And Carsey Warner was negotiating with me, and then I got the call from Mitch Hurwitz. He had read something. And I don't even remember what it was. And I went to Starbucks and met him, and I sat down and I said some joke right when I sat down, and he said, I can tell you right now you're hired. And I was like, oh my God. And it was an interesting situation because it was only 6-episode pickup. It was a small pickup and on a show that we all thought was really, we saw the pilot and thought it was really great, but no one thought that show was going to succeed. And it didn't in a lot of ways. It got canceled.
I was going to say it didn't. Popularity wise, it didn't. It sure did award wise.
Yeah. So then I told Bill Martin and Mike Schiff, who were my bosses at Grounded for Life, that I was going to pull out of the negotiation and go start this other show. And I think they got a little upset because they felt deservedly, because they're like, well, we found you, back even in those days, and especially in these days, you don't get a lot of jobs just from people who don't know you reading your script and bringing you in. It doesn't really happen that much. I got really lucky that these showrunners read every script and found someone. I didn't have I had like an agent that was in the 818 area code. You know, it wasn't like a situation. I wasn't TA or CAA.
For those of you not in show business, you don't want an agent with an 818 area.
No, this was a guy that was like, if he'll just take any client. He's like he was just a, you know, so it was just, that is what it is. And
as long as I don't have to pay to print it out, you're a client.
yeah, and weirdly enough, so Arrested did get canceled after 2 years, but it outlived Grounded for Life. It actually lasted longer than Grounded for Life, which got canceled, I think the following year after I left. So yeah, I did Arrested for a couple of years, 2 years, and
it's amazing how that show has lived on. I mean, it really does. You know, years after, my son discovered it and just loves it. It's like his favorite show.
Yeah, it's great, and mine as well, and they love it. But I didn't have the best, you know, I love that writer's room, but I didn't love, the hours were tough. And
right.
So
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, it just wasn't my lifestyle. It was too hard. It was just too much. Like, I don't want to live. I don't want the job to be my life. I want to be able, and I was also doing movie stuff on the side. I was going home at night and writing, you know, I wouldn't get home till midnight, and I would write from midnight to 1 on a movie because I wanted to get a movie career going, partially because I didn't think the TV stuff would last that much longer. I'm like, how long is this going to go? I'm going to get kicked to the curb. So after 2 years, Barbie and I both left Arrested Development, Barbie Adler, Barbie Feldman back, and went over to My Name Is Earl to start our new life.
And that's where we met. So Richard, how are we doing on time? We got okay, we got a couple minutes. So and I do want to mention about Barbie Adler, who I again had so much fun with you guys on Earl.
She's the best.
You wrote a pilot. You were never like a formal team, but you were sort of perceived a little bit as a team, but you were always separate writers. But you wrote a pilot that I just loved called, that didn't get, I can't believe that thing, that Work Wife didn't get paid, because it's such an interesting dynamic of a guy and a man and a woman who are as intricate to each other as any marriage, if not more so, but they go home to separate lives. And it was called Work Wife. I think I mentioned that. And it just, anyway, if you could just speak to that for us a little bit about the that dynamic.
It was Barbie is always, especially back then, and on the Arrested show as well. We were like work wife and work husband. We're just super close friends. She was a newlywed. I was kind of a newlywed. So we, you know, on the weekends we were going out as couples. We just became really close. And I think, you know, that there was kind of a foxhole mentality at Arrested Development that really made us close. And that's why we wanted to be together over in Arrested. So we wrote, we pitched a pilot called Work Wife to Dana Walden and Gary Newman at 20th, who were also seen as work wife and work husband. So they were really excited about it. And we took it out, and ABC really wanted it, and Fox wanted it. And Gary Newman said, we won't force you to sell it to Fox because we know it belongs on ABC, and we knew it belonged on ABC. But then they got a call from the higher ups at Fox, and they said, guess what? We're going to force you to sell it to Fox. And we knew it didn't belong on Fox. Like Fox, it wasn't a Fox show. It wasn't their tone. And it was heartbreaking because ABC really wanted it, was willing to put up a commitment, but it didn't matter. And we had Steve McPherson calling us at one point. You know, he said, I'll give you a $10 million commitment, meaning that they would pay that if they didn't make it. Cause he's like, it doesn't matter because we're going to make it. We're going to make it. So it was like, I'll put whatever number on it you want. You'll never see that number because we're just going to make the TV show. And we really wanted to go there, but we were forced to sell it to Fox, and they killed it. That was like, we turned the script and they're like, oh, this isn't what belongs on our air. And and it's died. That's TV. TV sometimes can be brutal. It really can.
I refer to I don't know if you ever heard this line, the Pauline Kael, the critic for the New York Times, her line, Hollywood is the only town where you can die from encouragement.
That's true.
And that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a break. I'm talking to Brad Copeland. It's so great to see him again. You can find him on Twitter at Bradland. You can find me on Twitter at TV's Tim Stack. And again, Brad Copeland, I believe, came up with the term TV's Tim Stack. I believe you were the one who coined that. So thank you.
I'm not sure. We'll have to check with the historians. I'm not sure.
That would be Hunter Covington, I think. And then and also Sprung is out there. And you've got some stuff. We'll talk about that on the other side. But if you haven't seen Sprung, another Greg Garcia, that's where Brad and I met, please check it out on Freevee. Okay, we will be right back with more It's TV's Tim Stack's radio show. Even I got it wrong at the end. So let's. What's that?
Radio with TV's Tim Stack. It's called a podcast.
You
You
ready?
want to change it to it's a podcast with TV's Tim Stack?
No. No, it's not as I like the other one better. Okay, we're gonna play another clip.
How's my son?
He's going to be all right.
Oh,
Thank God.
finally, some good news.
There's
from
no
this
other way
guy.
to take that.
That's a great attitude. I gotta tell you, if I was getting this news, I don't know that I'd take it this well.
But you said he was all right.
Yes, he's lost his left hand, so he's going to be all right.
You son of a bitch! I hate this doctor!
He's a very literal man. Yes, that's more the way I would.
That joke cracked me up when I was going. He's all right.
All
He lost his left hand. So let's put Arrested Development a little bit on the back burner. I do want to talk some more about that show. Let's go back to My Name Is Earl, because that's where we met. I had John Hoberg and Kat Lickle on the podcast, and they were talking about their memory. I don't remember this, but their memory of Earl was they said it was like a rough room. I didn't ever thought it was like a rough room. And anyway, I'd love to hear your comment on that. I just thought it was a fun room. I just thought.
I mean, they can kind of be the same, right? I think it's a funny rough room. But it was all with love. I think there was a lot of teasing, and kind of biting that you probably, frankly, couldn't do today in a room. But it was always funny, deeply funny. They were just hilarious people in there. So I really liked it. I liked the ribbing. But I had gotten used to it. On Arrested Development, we had Jimmy Valley. You're probably.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know that guy.
And on my first day, like literally the first minute of the first day, I sat down. We were all introducing ourselves, and Jimmy says, "This guy's overrated," and it just out of nowhere.
Right.
It was just like, it was kind of like trial by fire, and I was like, "All right, that's how the sitcom world is." But I loved it. I thought that was a fun room. You were always showing up in your shorts after your long drive from Santa Barbara, rolling in your yellow Sebring. And that was just an interesting world. We were up there in the sticks and that disgusting.
Yes, we'll all have mesothelioma from that building.
Yes, that place was crazy. That place was crazy. And I remember the writer's room looked out over nothing, right? It had a window, but the window was into the stage.
It was blocked. The window was in the stage and it was all covered up.
Yeah, so it's like it was just a box within a box. But I really had fun. At least most of it. I didn't have towards the end. We had some drama that played out, but I think it was just great. And JB Cook and all those guys there, and we were playing Mario Kart at lunch, and we would just scream. We had like this whole $5 bet board going, and the money would triple and quadruple. All over just grown people playing Mario Kart. It was just great. It was like camp for 2 years.
But one of the things, and so that was an easy transition for you to go from Arrested Development to Son of the Beach. That's where I left to come there. That was an easy transition for you to go to Earl.
It was. I mean, personality-wise, it was. I love, like, the writers were all the same, and they were all talented, and so it felt like going from one room of geniuses to another. Creatively, it was different. There was a different process, and it was. Greg Garcia, is in the other. He's a genius, but he's not in the room constantly with you. And I wasn't used to that because Mitch Hurwitz is always in the room. So
Right.
I wasn't used to the number two, who was Bobby Bowman in that show, kind of being the guy and then reporting back and forth. So that stuff, I didn't do so well with that, frankly. But but it was just fun, and I met so many people that we're all still friends today, which is great when you come away with these lifelong friends.
So you had mentioned buying things and you got guitars with John Hoberg, but I remember a contest, and I think Hoberg was in on it, and maybe Mike Penny, where people, this is going to sound horrible, but people took, and you were in on this, I think it was Mike Penny and John Hoberg, people took extra Ambien at night, and then they would go on eBay, and whoever bought the craziest thing by morning won the contest. And I think it was John Hoberg who won the contest because he had bought a key to a castle. Like it was a key that was 3 feet long, like something Ivanhoe would have used to open a castle door or something.
Yeah.
And John Hoberg, and that
sounds right. I didn't play that game, but I was always there, was a witness for it. I think at one point John bought a car. Like he had bought like one of his Trans Ams or whatever he had bought. It's I guess you have a half-hour zone after you take the Ambien where you're still awake, but you're not going to remember that half hour before you fall asleep. In that half hour is when they'd make the purchases.
I think actually part of the contest might be you can't start buying till a half an hour's over. So it's really get like you have no idea.
Really
somebody needs to watch you so you don't drive a car after that. So but I do remember in the room you mentioned me coming down in shorts. I do remember because they brought up this moment. This was their example of it being a rough room. One day you wore some shirt. I don't remember the shirt. You wore a shirt to work, and I guess you got a lot of grief for it. Whatever. I remember not wearing shorts one day, and I wore jogging pants to work. And Barbie Adler lit me up for about an hour because they sort of did look like I should be at a nursing home. Like, these are the clothes a 75-year-old man wears. Anyway, it was
Barbie is I do remember the shirt. It was a Hawaiian shirt I would have worn that day, a Paul Smith Hawaiian shirt, and they were telling me I looked like a bagger at Trader Joe's, which but the Barbie especially she's like Don Rickles in there. So she's always been, I still see her every weekend almost, and she's still the same. You can't wear the wrong thing around her or she's going to go after you.
It's so funny. Really it kept going on. It was like an hour. Really, Barbie, you're still on the jogging pants? Yeah, because they're so ridiculous.
And she'll keep bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back. But I think like that laughter, I love that. I think that's one of the things that, comedy comes from that. And I always like that about the Earl room and other rooms I've been in, but Earl especially. The more of that you have, the more it's like a frat house, then the funnier it gets, the funnier the scripts get.
I agree. So let's use that as a transition because you've also written all these big successful movies. I mean, I was looking, the movie Ferdinand has made like $300 million. I mean, these are big monster hits. Wild Hogs, huge, big hit. How did the movie writing start?
The movie writing started out of desperation on Arrested Development, because that first year I really thought it was going to get canceled, and I loved it. And we were, like I said, we had just gotten married. We wanted to have a family, and I'm like, I got to have some kind of other income when this all falls away. So it was anxiety writing, and I wrote a movie called Corporate Retreat.
Yes, I remember this now. This was great,
and it sold to Disney. And that just opened all these doors. It was people really liked the script. Vince Vaughn later. Do you know what happened? I don't know if you know the story.
No, and then I thought you were going to maybe make a pilot but no, you were going to make the movie.
I was going to make the movie, but the movie's rated R. So
Disney actually, I'm interrupting. You actually talked to me about there was some part maybe I was going to play some old corporate guy. Yes.
Yeah, you were going to be the CEO in there, and so what happened was Disney couldn't make that movie because it was rated R, and Touchstone had gone down. They weren't, after Wild Hogs and all these other things. Dick Cook, who was running the studio, said no more adult movies, no more Touchstone. We're only doing, Pirates of the Caribbean type stuff. So Disney gave me that movie back to take out to direct. So I took it out. I met with Vince Vaughn to be in it, and Vince, we didn't really hit it off. he was nice enough, but he's like, look, you're a first-time director. I don't take notes. I'm going to want a final cut and edit. And I'm like, this doesn't sound fun. And I still had that same confidence of like, I want it to be fun, or I don't want to do it at all.
Also, you're coming from TV where the writer is important.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't want this to be, I didn't like it. And I didn't feel right. And but he was very complimentary of the script. He's like, I love that it's in Bora Bora. I love that it's about a retreat. I love that it's, overwater bungalows and all these set pieces. And then, I went back and I called UTA. I said, no, it's not a fit. I don't want to do it. And then a month later, Vince Vaughn, the trades come out. Vince Vaughn has just sold Couples Retreat, based on Bora Bora with overwater bungalows. And next thing you know, my movie was dead, because there you can read into.
I didn't. No, that's an even worse story than set up the Pauline Kael quote.
Yeah, it's like I said, Hollywood can be rough sometimes.
Yeah. And that movie did not do well, right? Couples Retreat. I don't think that.
No, I don't know. I never looked, and every time I saw a poster, for understandable reasons, I had to look away. It really was, and it was Salt in the Wound that Jason Bateman starred in it, who I knew, and it was like, and I never really told him, I didn't want to put that in his conscience of, hey, you're doing a movie that maybe I wrote that Vince Vaughn is doing instead. But yeah, but anyway, that opened doors. And because that script was well liked, I was able to pitch Wild Hogs, and that was the shortest. I just literally said City Slickers on motorcycles, and you could see people go, "Okay, that makes sense. Let's do that."
So,
and that kind of
so I'm sorry. So that idea that was your own idea, or somebody gave it to you?
It was an idea that I had with my friend Bobby, my best friend that I went to college with. We were just talking one day. Bobby lives in Jupiter. And Bobby said, what about all these crazy posers, going to Daytona Bike Week? They're not bikers. They're just dentists and stuff. And,
right.
So then the movie idea sprung out of that. And I called UTA, called my talent people. And I said, I want to do a movie about these 60-year-old posers on motorcycles. And they're like, run with it, because no one else is really doing that. It was like one of those ideas that was obvious. It was a little zeitgeisty, and
yeah, but it's a perfect pitch. It's City Slickers on motorcycles.
City Slickers on motorcycles, but it wasn't supposed to be. I wrote it for it was supposed to be old school. It was supposed to be like Vince and Will.
We don't
Ferrell.
want Vince Vaughn.
Well, that was before Vince had burned me. But it was supposed to be like Will Ferrell. I really wanted Will Ferrell to be in it, and then Tim Allen got the script and just jumped into it. And Disney called, and they're like, "It's going to be a Tim Allen movie." I'm like, "All right, at least it'll get made. It'll be fun." So yeah, we went through, and then I just started. Animation kind of came from the same world. I just started getting in and pitching ideas, and then rewriting Rio and other animated movies, and then started writing animated.
Okay, we're going to take our final break. Talking to Brad Copeland, It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack, and we'll talk about some more about Wild Hogs, and I want to get back to Arrested Development a little bit again on the other side. See you in a second.
Right.
Okay, and I'll take you all the way to 2 o'clock. You got 12 minutes. 3.
Okay, great.
1.
I don't think I've ever seen you guys around here before. What's your Wild Hogs? Yeah. That's the name of your little gang?
It's not a gang. We're just friends riding from Cincinnati to the coast.
Hey, man.
We in your seats?
No.
No, because we.
No. We roll. No. I insist. Sit. I insist. I think I'm gonna join you, Phil.
That's from Wild Hogs. I'm with Brad Copeland, the writer of that film. You're listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. Brad, that movie, obviously wildly successful. And in talking to you, I'm assuming that was only a great experience, right?
It was. Making it was great. It was fun, and I'd never been on a big movie set like that. That was
That's part of my question. It's like, I remember you talking about, because my thinking is like, oh my God, John Travolta is going to show up here. Like, that to me would be really cool, because he's such an icon. And yeah, I remember you telling me, like, oh my God, he's so nice. He's so cool.
He was the nicest guy in the world, as was Ray Liotta, rest in peace, who was in that clip. They all were so nice. Yeah, it was the only thing I wasn't ready for is you're kind of king in TV.
Yeah.
And in movies, no one gives a shit. Excuse my language.
Right.
About the screenwriter. Like, they don't care. So it's like, they're like, you're very treated very nicely. But if you're like, hey, that's not how I imagined that shot, or that's not how I imagined that joke, the director's like, okay, great, yeah, and just like walks away. And so you don't get to call the shots. I didn't really know that.
But you were on the set the whole time they were making it, weren't you?
A lot of it, yeah, a lot of it. I'd say at least 60 or 70%. We shot it in New Mexico, and I was down there. And it was just a blast, and it was just crazy. It was just trailers everywhere, and I'd never been on something that big with, like, built a town.
So much money. That's the thing. Like, when I look back at some of the beaches, like 3 trailers and a hot dog cart, like, that's the budget. And then having worked on something, Castaway that I worked on, it's like, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's an army. It's like a legion of an army that shows up to a location, and they get films made.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then we made the movie, and everyone kind of made fun of it. They made fun of the movie, with not just the critics, but just in general. They're like, oh, there's all these old guys together. Who cares? So then when it came out and it did really, really well, it was just the sweetest victory because it's like, screw all you guys. It came out and it made, hundreds of millions of dollars, and now it's become this iconic thing. I was watching a Hot Tub Time Machine the other day with my son, with my 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And there's a line in Hot Tub Time Machine where Rob Corddry goes, "Come on, guys, we're all together. It's Wild Hogs." And Oliver, my son, looked at me and he's like, "They're referencing your movie in another movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's like a huge honor. Like that, you don't see that much. You don't see other, so the fact that it became kind of this pop culture thing where Ricky Gervais made a joke about it 2 years ago at the Hollywood at the Golden Globes and stuff. It's great. I like that it's become this thing.
What can I say? I like the movie. It's still funny, and those performers, and just so. Now, this is go back to the confidence thing. So I'm wondering, were you intimidated? Like, you show up as the writer to say the rehearsals. Are you intimidated? Are you hiding in the corner, or are you out talking to people?
I was out talking to people, but the director of that movie, Walt Becker, wasn't like a guy that had directed 100 things, and he's just, you know what I mean? He was still kind of.
So he needed you.
He needed me, but I think he liked having some backup on stuff. I mean, there were a few times where I'm like, this joke doesn't sound right, and here's why. And he would say, "Okay, go tell them that." To the director or to the actors, go.
Yeah.
I think all of us, and him including, we're Tim Allen, I don't think is super receptive to comedic notes, and so it's like stuff like that. We were all a little intimidated, but we were all just trying to make a funny movie. And those guys do just have so much natural talent that a lot of it is just, you're just being a traffic cop and you're just watching them do their thing,
And Ray Liotta, you said rest in peace. That obviously went well. I would be so scared though, because of Goodfellas. I would be so panicked to talk to him. Like, maybe you could try it this way.
My fear with him was that he wasn't going to care. Like, I really thought like, oh, he's such a good actor and Goodfellas and all these things. And now he's doing my dopey movie about, city slickers on motorcycles. He's going to show up and be this guy that's like, "Oh, I'm just here to collect a paycheck. Where do I stand?" or whatever. But it was the opposite. Like you hear in that clip, he really leaned into it and had fun with it and just like chewed the scenery as you wanted that character, the bad guy, to do. And it was great. So it was just really fun. It felt really good of like, oh, you're actually really going to bring this to life and make it special. And he really did. He was a great bad guy in that movie.
Yeah. I just saw him this weekend in Cocaine Bear, which.
Oh, is he in that? I got to go watch it.
He's in that. My take was that film could use some cocaine.
True.
I just thought like maybe a blast might make it. I don't know. It's good. It's good. It's funny. It's good. It was one of those like, oh man, I want this to be like a laugh out loud for 2-hour experience, because I want to do that in the movies again.
Yeah.
So then back to Arrested Development. Well, back to Arrested Development. Again, I remember you talking like, because I would sort of run through the names, like who was cool to work with. And I remember, again, rest in peace, Jessica Walters, because I'm thinking, play Misty for me. She, and it was just the opposite. You said she was wonderful.
She was. I mean, she was, particular with things, but she was great. Like all the actors on that were so nice. Tony Hale's one of the nicest people in the world. Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, Portia, they were all so nice. And then we had a lot of guest stars. Liza Minnelli was great.
I remember you talking about her. You're hanging out with Liza Minnelli, which to me
is Liza. We shot at the Magic Castle one time, and she was they have that piano that plays by itself, and it started playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and she just sat down and started singing it. And I was sitting there, and I looked around, and no one else was there because it was like in between. It was a lighting setup. And I'm like, where's the video? Like, you just know in that moment, she's singing it and I'm right here and she's right there. There was just a lot of magical things like that in that show that I'll just never forget. And a lot of really talented people.
That's a crazy story. You wish you had that on video. That would be.
Yeah. I just wish someone would have seen it. I literally was looking around like, someone see this so you could verify that.
Nobody believed you afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I saw her sing it. It was Somewhere in the Rainbow. I saw her. So then back to the feature writing. So when you're by yourself, because you talked about in the room with all the laughs, which I really love, but then you're by yourself, you obviously trust yourself enough to know, like, I think this is funny, I'm going to go with it. But nobody in the room is laughing. You don't have that judge telling you, yeah, this is really funny after pitching the joke. Which one do you prefer? Or maybe you don't need to make a choice.
I prefer the one where I don't have to judge. I really do like to hear it in my head and to see how it does and to go with that. I don't like having jokes shot down. I've never liked it. I mean, plenty of my jokes deserve to be shot down, and I shoot down more of my own than anybody.
Right.
But when I think something's really great, and I've had jokes in everything I've done where the showrunner is just like, and I'm just like, I know that would work, and I haven't always been right, but it's nice to be in that, to be a screenwriter and you get the last say.
Right.
So, and it's even better to, I've directed one movie. I want to direct another one here in a couple of years. It's even better. If you're the writer director, you really get the whole enchilada of getting it across and getting your vision to the screen. And there's just nothing more satisfying than that. The downside of that is the people. You're by yourself and you're not with the Johnny Cats and Tim Stacks and JB Cooks that make you laugh, and that can get a little bit like, oh, this just isn't as fun of a 9-to-5 job when you're screenwriting. More like being a novelist.
You mentioned JV Cook. We can go off topic for a second. He was this really funny guy. He wrote on King of the Hill. He's a comic. He's from Texas.
Yeah.
He had the craziest Texas stories, just like one after another. But you mentioned your shirt from Trader Joe's. JB Cook, when we would finish work, I don't know if you remember this, he would sometimes go to the Vons in Valencia where he lived, and he would work as a bagger, but he wasn't paid. He would just bag,
like talking to people.
Yeah, he would just pay people and just talk to them. And we always made jokes like, why aren't you going home? Your wife? And it's like, she doesn't like to hear my stories, but the people at Vons love my stories, and he would do that. And we ended up getting a bagger story on My Name Is Earl out of that. I remember that the kid from Napoleon Dynamite came on the set.
Yeah.
Or there was a little conspiracy there because there was a rumor that, what's his name from Napoleon Dynamite? I can't remember his name. We'll get it. There was, because he has a twin brother, and there was a rumor that sometimes he would send the twin brother to do his jobs. Did you ever hear that?
I think I have, yeah.
And so out of that bagger story, he was the guest star on the bagger story on My Name Is Earl. But I sort of bought into it because I remember at lunchtime, I had met him before on the set of Benchwarmers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, and he was a huge Nightstand fan, John Heater, and he's got a twin brother, John Heater. So I met him on Benchwarmers, and he was a huge Nightstand with Dick Dietrich fan. Like he really like knew the episodes and was like, I was like, oh my God, John Heater, Napoleon Dynamite likes my show. So then when My Name Is Earl came around a couple years later, we're in the lunch line. I was like, hey, John, nice to see you again. And he looked at me like he had no clue. I went, Tim Staff, we met at Benchwarmers. We talked a lot about Nightstand. And he just looked at me again like he had no clue. So I tossed it off like, God forbid he doesn't recognize me. It must be the twin brother.
I'm sure it was that. I'm sure it was the twin.
So now we're wrapping up here, but I know you didn't sold. I'm sure they came. It was an easy sale for you. A pilot set in Las Vegas. You're writing that.
Writing a pilot set in Las Vegas for NBC. We'll see how that's going to go in the future. And
is it a multicam? Because those.
No, it's a single cam, which might work against it. I think right now NBC is really leaning into multicams because of Night Court being so successful. But I have another pilot also I'm working on. And I have a movie that I'm adapting for Amazon called The Beatrice Prophecy, which is based on a book called The Beatrice Prophecy by Kate DiCamillo, who wrote Tales of Despero and Winn-Dixie. And Flora and Ulysses, a movie I adapted for Disney. So I'm adapting. That's a big, crazy, epic medieval movie that I'm doing for Amazon that'll take the next 6 months. So that we'll see how that goes.
So here's the question. How do you divide your time? Like, how do you say 8 to 12, I'm doing this one, 2 to 4, I'm doing that? How does that work for you?
I never shift during the day. I just do it like, okay, this week I'm going to finish this, scene or rewrite of this one thing. And then next week I move to the next thing. And sometimes I'll shift one day after the other. Like this morning, I had to do a bunch of notes on a pilot, and tomorrow I'm going to go back to focus on another movie that I haven't mentioned, that I can't mention, and work on that for a day. So it's just, you just put your head in different spaces. But I think some people look at it as a strength. I think it's just an attention span thing. I like to have multiple things going, and I get bored.
I go
really
back to
quick.
this.
Yeah, let's go back to
I
that.
go back to this. Like I just never saw anything like it. But I think you would be the guy capable of doing that. And Greg Garcia too. It's like the ability to focus. I don't have that ability. I have the ability to come up with funny lines, but I don't have that ability, which is it's really a talent, and you're reaping the benefits. So
Thank you. Trying to.
We are out of time. You've been listening to Brad Copeland. Brad, thank you so much. You
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You can find him at Bradland on Twitter. You're too busy. You don't get to tweet that much, but I notice when they do show up. And this has been a pleasure. You've been listening to It's Radio with TV's Tim Stack. Thank you to Jeremiah Higgins, always our producer, Dr. D, Richard Dugan, the engineer, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.